Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Habibi R.A, and today I will present to you a lesson about adverb of frequency. This not frequently, I'm sorry, a typo. So first off, what is an adverb? An adverb is a word that modifies a verb, such as he sings loudly. An adjective, very tall, another adverb, add too quickly, or even a whole sentence. Fortunately, I had brought an umbrella. Adverbs often end in ly, but some, such as fast, look exactly the same as their adjective counterpart. And so, what are adverbs of frequency? An adverb of frequency is a word that is employed in a sentence to give more information about the verb, adjective, or another adverb. Adverbs of frequency can be placed after the noun or pronoun that acts as the subject and before the verb if there is just one verb in a sentence. If there's more than one verb in a sentence, such as auxiliary verb, the adverb of frequency can be positioned before the main verb. An adverb of frequency describes how often an action happens. There are 6 main adverbs of frequency that we use in English, such as always, usually, or normally, often, sometimes, rarely, and never. There's the frequency scale of the usage. The adverbs are generally ordered by how often something happens. Here's a typical scale. So there's always 100% of the time, usually around 80 to 90% of the time, often around 60 to 70% of the time, sometimes 40 to 50% of the time, occasionally around 30% of the time, and rarely 10 to 20% of the time, and there is never 0% of the time. Here's an example of all of them. She always drinks coffee in the morning. We usually walk to school. He often reads before bed. They sometimes go hiking on weekends. I occasionally eat fast food. He rarely watches movies. She never skips breakfast. Here's some image about adverbs of frequency. There's also seldom, but I didn't mention it before. Around 10%. I think it's almost the same as rarely. Now, what about the position in a sentence? General placement of adverbs of frequency are usually placed before the main verb in a sentence. For example, I often read books. She always listens to music. Exception with to be verbs, where using the verb to be, am, is, are, was, were, place the adverb after the verb. Example, he is usually on time. They are never late. With modal verbs and auxiliary verbs, place the adverb between the auxiliary or modal verb and the main verb. For example, I can sometimes help with homework. They have always enjoyed sport. And there is also question forms of adverbs of frequency. When asking question with adverbs of frequency, you typically place the adverb in after the subject and auxiliary verb, or after the verb to be. Yes or no question, use do or does with the subject and adverb frequency to confirm if an action is regular. Example, do you always study in the morning? To be questions, when using the verb to be, place the adverb right after it. Example, is he usually on time? Here are some question forms of adverbs of frequency. And there's using always and never. Always and never represent two extremes frequency. Always implies that an action happens every single time, signaling a strong habit or routine. For instance, if you say, I always brush my teeth, you are indicating that brushing your teeth is a consistent part of your daily routine without exception. In contrast, never means that an action doesn't occur at all, as in, she never skips her morning exercise. Here, never emphasize that missing exercise is not an option. It's something that simply doesn't happen. When using these adverbs in sentence, always or never typically appear before the main verb. Like in he always checks his work before submitting it. However, if the sentence includes the verb to be, these adverbs follow directly after it. For example, she is always prepared, or they are never late. Using usually and often. Usually and often, which are adverbs that suggest regularity with a bit of flexibility. Both adverbs indicate action that happen frequently, though not always. Usually implies that an action happens most of the time, but allows for rare exceptions, while often suggests that an action occurs many times but with slightly less consistency. For example, consider the sentence, they usually go to the park on weekends. Here usually shows that visiting the park is a common activity for, I'm sorry. Where was I? For example, consider the sentence. They usually go to the park on weekends. Here usually shows that visiting the park is a common activity for them on weekends, although there might be times they don't. In comparison, saying she often reads books implies that she reads regularly, but there's less certainty about how consistently she does it compared to usually. The placement of usually and often follows standard adverb rules, so they typically go before the main verb, such as we often have meetings on Mondays, or right after the verb to be, such as he is usually friendly. Using sometimes and occasionally. Sometimes and occasionally are adverbs of frequency that express actions occurring intermittently but not regularly. These words add flexibility and spontaneity to a language, describing actions that are neither frequent nor rare. For instance, sometimes suggests an action happens from time to time without a strict pattern, as in he sometimes watches TV before bed. This implies he doesn't do it every night, but it's also not uncommon. Similarly, occasionally means the action happens even less frequently than sometimes, but is still possible. For example, they occasionally travel for work. Suggests it's not a common occurrence but happens every now and then. In terms of placement, sometimes and occasionally typically go before the main verb, as in, I sometimes read in the afternoon. However, they can also appear at the beginning or end of a sentence for emphasis, like, sometimes I read in the afternoon or I read in the afternoon occasionally. Using rarely and seldom. Rarely and seldom are adverbs that indicate actions occurring infrequently less often than sometimes, but more than never. These words help express actions that are not part of a regular routine, but still happen occasionally, though very infrequently. For instance, if you say she rarely eats junk food, you are conveying that eating junk food is an unusual choice for her. Similarly, he seldom watches TV, suggests that watching television is not part of his daily or even weekly habits. The terms placement, rarely, and seldom are positioned like most adverbs of frequency. They typically appear before the main verb, as in he rarely skips a workout, or in sentence with the verb to be, they follow it, as in they are seldom late. These placements help keep the focus on how infrequently these actions occur without changing the sentence structure. Here's the examples of positive and negative statements of adverbs of frequency. Adverb of frequency can be used to create both positive and negative statements, highlighting the frequency of action. In positive sentence, adverbs like always, often, sometimes, rarely, and never provide clear insights into how frequently someone does something. On the other hand, negative statements convey the absence of an action. Here, adverbs of frequency are placed between the auxiliary verb, if present, and the main verb. So the example of positive statement here, he often plays soccer. Eh, this indicates he He plays soccer frequently, so which means it's a frequent activity. And the negative statement, he doesn't often play soccer, occasionally but regularly. While he doesn't play often, but that doesn't mean he doesn't play at all. It's just that he maybe rarely play. Well, not often, but maybe rarely. Yeah, something like that. Frequency adverbs with to be verbs. Frequency adverbs can be effectively used with the verb to be to describe the regularity of states or conditions. When constructing sentence, it's important to note that frequency adverbs like always, usually, sometimes, rarely, and never typically come after the verb to be. For example, if you might say, she is always cheerful, which indicates that her cheerful demeanor is a constant trait. Using to be with frequency adverbs allow us to discuss not just actions, but also the nature of a person or situation. For instance, they are often late suggests a habitual lateness. The structure provides insight into someone's personality or situation's typical state. It's essential to remember that when using frequency adverbs with to be, the adverb follows the verb directly. These straightforward placements make it easy to convey how often a particular condition exists. Adverbs of frequency in daily routine. Adverbs of frequency play a significant role in describing daily routines, providing insight into how often certain activities occur in our lives. By incorporating adverbs like always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, and never, we can convey the regularity of our actions. For example, when we say, I usually have breakfast at 7 a.m., the adverb usually suggests that this is a common part of our morning routine. But there might be exceptions. Similarly, they sometimes walk to work implies that walking is not their only mode of transportation, indicating variability in their routine. Using these adverbs helps create a clearer picture of our daily habits. Saying she always drinks coffee in the morning indicates a strong habit, while he rarely eats lunch at home highlights infrequent occurrence. This specificity allows listeners to understand not only the frequency of activities, but also the individual's lifestyle and preference. So, what about the real life application of adverbs of frequency? Well, understanding how to use adverbs of frequency like always, often, sometimes, rarely, and never allows us to describe our daily routines and habits more accurately. These adverbs help convey how frequently we engage in certain activities, making our conversations more descriptive and engaging. For instance, you might say, I always wake up at 7 a.m., which is like your commitment to a morning routine. In contrast, you might mention, I sometimes enjoy coffee at noon, suggesting that this is not a daily occurrence but something you do occasionally. Such as, wait, I'm sorry. Such statements provide insight into your lifestyle and preference in social situation. Using efforts or frequency can foster deeper connections. When asked about your weekend plans, saying, I often go hiking with friends, not only informs others about your activities, but also opens the door for shared interests and conversations about outdoor adventures. Here are the examples of adverbs of frequency. So, in conclusion, adverbs of frequency are essential tools in the English language that help us articulate how often actions occur. By understanding and using adverbs like always, often, sometimes, rarely, and never, we can enhance our communication skill, making our conversations richer and more informative. These adverbs not only allow us to express our routines and habits with clarity, but also help us connect with others by sharing insights into our daily life. Whether in casual discussions, social interactions, or professional settings, employing efforts of frequency enables us to convey our experience accurately and engage more meaningfully with our listeners. As you continue to practice using these adverbs, you'll find that they will become a natural part of your speech and writing, enhancing your ability to communicate effectively in English. These are my thoughts, and that's all from me, I think. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry for everything I said wrong, or maybe if I offend you. That's all from me, I guess. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Habibi R.A. I'm from class 101A01, majoring in software engineering. And today I would like to talk about why I support our campus policy regarding banning smoking in the campus areas. So, first thing first, smoking not only affects those who choose to smoke, but also everyone around them. Secondhand smoke poses serious health risks, especially in a place where we gather to learn and to socialize. A smoke-free campus promotes a healthier environment for everyone. It respects the rights of non-smokers. Besides, the clean air and clean environment reflect well on our campus, showing our commitment to a progressive, health-conscious community. While I understand some of you might think this policy as restrictive, I believe it ultimately serves the well-being of everyone. So let's just work together to create a supportive and healthy community. And that's all from me, I think. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.